think the two things that I would like to say is being persistent and adaptable. And that reflects in my own my own career, because I kind of fell into teaching. When we tell our stories about our lives, we give it a kind of consistency, and of course it's not like that, is it? It's very tangential. In terms of being persistent, I've done 2 PhDs, and not many people.
Doctor.
Yeah. Well, the first one was a disaster. So I started again. Basically, my first degree was history, and then I wanted to stay on I thought I might be an effective teacher, but I didn't want to teach in secondary school, and so I wanted to teach at a higher level or primary school, not so much secondary school. So I was able to get a grant to do social anthropology, and in those days you still had grants to do these kinds of crazy things. And so I found it quite difficult to switch from history, which is very, very limited, very intense, to anthropology, which was making vast theories about social evolution. And I went to see my tutor. I did my history at Oxford, and my tutor I got on best with was a medieval economic historian, and there aren't many of those. And we had tea, the usual thing, and he said, how are you getting on with your diploma? I said, well, I'm learning all about these kind of social evolution, and his eyes got wider and wider, because he eventually got around to doing his DPhil at Oxford in his 40s, and he wrote one learned article which was published in the Journal of the Royal Historical Society, and it was profit and loss accountancy in Norwich Cathedral chapter between 1352 and 1370, which he thought dangerously broad in its conceptual. So when I started talking about anthropology, he freaked out, So anyway, I taught actually, Tim. I taught in a school in Zambia, and but before going to university, I did a kind of gap year, and I taught in a secondary school, which was near the Copper Belt, in fact, near the Congo border. So that was for me a very striking transformation, because I've been brought up in a Sussex village where the only outsiders were the next village, and suddenly be on a plane from Gatwick to Lusaka, Entebbe, landing, and then Lusaka. I'm suddenly in this Central Africa and a very different concept. So it made me think about cultural diversity. So when I did the anthropology, I thought, well, I have a bit of taste about Africa, but I really like to learn more about India, because I felt that India had been less under the influence of British colonialism, whereas I thought Zambia, Africa, different story in a way. But anyway, so and then I thought, well, in Oxford, of course, you sink or swim, and I eventually sort of sank. Because I was very interested in identity, because I'd been adopted when I was 7, and so I changed my identity completely. I was born Philip Richard Clark, and then at 7 I became Philip John Kinsey Eade. So it comes back to what we now would accept, is that we tend to research ourselves in a way, that we project ourselves in, because that gives us passion in what we're doing. So anyway. So off I go to Calcutta, because I brought up in a village, so I didn't want to do what most anthropologists did, was go to a village. I thought, boring, and too many mosquitoes. Anyway, so I hung around Calcutta, which is a big mistake, because anthropologists in the 60s did village or small island stuff, because people couldn't escape from you, Whereas in the city people can, they say, piss off, I'm talking to you, you're a spy anyway, etc. So I really dug a rather big hole for myself. But I had a wonderful time because I lived with a Bengali Muslim family. And he was a professor of English, so we had very learned discussions about Shakespeare and all that kind of thing, you know, as well as about Islam, because they were Bengali Muslims, and they'd gone to a Jesuit school, so there was a wonderful, you know, capacity of Indian middle class to speak 4 different languages and move between all these cultures. And I was able to take part in family life, and they started thinking I might become a Muslim, but I was a Catholic, so they packed me off to Mass every morning during Lent, because, you know, Ramadan's supposed to be penance, you know, so Lent is supposed to be also, you know, get up and get out, and you call yourself a Catholic, go to Mass, etc. So there was all this kind of wonderful experience, but when I went back to Oxford, my supervisor couldn't make head or tail of it, and I couldn't either, really, because I only learning the craft. So anyway, then I had to look for a job because my grant was running out. So I got a job here, and but on the strength of my unfinished doctorate. So I felt honor bound to finish this wretched thing, and I had 2 vivas, and a viva can last a very long time. If things aren't going terribly well. And after about 3 hours, you know, I got the impression that things weren't going terribly well. So anyway, they told me to come back and try again, and I tried again. And then I went to see my supervisor, and he dropped dead, and I felt very upset about that, because it wasn't his job to drop dead. And, So eventually I thought, well, let's start again. So I and of course I was getting pressure from my head department and historical values and principal of the Stewart to, you know, you got the job on the strength of this. So I re-enrolled at Birkbeck, and I'm eternally grateful to Birkbeck. It's a wonderful institution. And then I had the issue, you know, I can't keep on going back to Calcutta. So what do? Well, you know, Bengalis had arrived in East London, so problem solved, you know. So, and then I had a wonderful supervisor, Samri Sabaida, who gave me, read all my stuff and introduced me to Michel Foucault, which made a lot of sense at the time. So really, I missed 10 years, but I caught up. So I suppose the point about that is trying to be persistent. And of course it reflects also, tell you a kind of rather creepy story, quite an emotional one actually, because my mother, I was adopted, and my adopted mother, I gave her a really hard time because she refused to tell me anything about my past. My first 7 years were a kind of empty space. I gave her a really hard time, of course, you do when you're a teenager, don't you? Well, I certainly did anyway. I was just getting back to having a more civilized relationship with her, because I'd become a Catholic and they were very Protestant, and they threatened to cut off my grant, which is a very psychologically bad thing to do, because I made me even more determined to become a Catholic. You know. But anyway, I went off to Lourdes because I got fascinated by pilgrimage and started volunteering as a helper in Lourdes. But of course I never told my parents about this because it's a taboo subject. I dreaded any news with the Pope on there, because my father said, look at him, you know, he tells all those Catholics, they all, you know, it's kind of Monty Python really. So I was in Lourdes and I came back and I rang up expecting to get a lift back, and my father said, oh, your mother's been killed in a horse riding accident. And she'd been dead 3 days. So I never had that kind of chance to kind of make up. But I did, because my mother, she was a supervisor midwife, and she worked with doctors all the time. She wanted me to be a doctor. So part of this PhD was to become a doctor, you know, to prove to my mother that I could actually do this thing. And I remember, we have all these things when you're so hyped up, and I had my Viva, and the Viva went very well in spite of a whole page missing from my PhD, and the examiner said, oh, it's good, blah, blah, blah. And, 3 o'clock in the morning, I was having a bath because I couldn't sleep, and I suddenly had this sensation of my mother behind me. And I said to my mother, no, it's okay, I've become a doctor, you can go away now. And so it was a wonderful feeling of release, really. So that's the point, the main point, I think, really. Never give up, even despite all these ups and downs. And the second thing, I think, is to be adaptable. So I suppose in the years that I've been here, I've sort of gone through various permutations, largely working with other colleagues and pursuing various things like a master's in anthropology of travel and tourism. So I've got all these theses in my room as well, gathering dust. So and also I when we were in alliance with Surrey University, I worked with 2 professors down at Surrey setting up a research centre, which was wonderful. I had 8 years of bidding for grants and running conferences and workshops and hanging out with lots of great people. So, I suppose one skill I have is networking and working with people in all kinds of ways and not being fixed in a certain way. I'm not going to do this. Let's pursue these ideas. So I think the second thing is to just to work with people and to just try various doors, and if a door is open, then pursue it, because you're never sure where it's going to lead. Thanks very much.